Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to Experiencer Interviews, a YouTube channel created as a portal for experiencers to tell their amazing life stories. Experiencers are people that live through amazing out-of-this-world events regarding the paranormal, UFOs, and extraterrestrial contact. And today, we have three lovely ladies who are all book authors, speakers, and great extraterrestrial contactees, and are well known within the UFO field. We have Suzy Hansen from New Zealand, Judy Carroll from Australia, and Sherry Wilde from the USA. Suzy Hansen's worldview was shaken in 1975 at age 20 when her car engulfed and lifted off the road by a massive white ball of light, resulting in 90 minutes missing time. The incident catapulted Suzy headlong into researching New Zealand's nationwide UFO sightings and her own ongoing contact experiences recalled from early childhood. Suzy Hansen is a UFO sighting investigator, author, and contact experiencer from New Zealand. By profession, she was a primary and college teacher and grief counselor. Suzy is the author of The Dual Soul Connection, The Alien Agenda for Human Advancement, with contributions from Dr. Rudy Shield, Emeritus Professor of Astrophysics from Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. The Dual Soul Connection documents Suzy's lifetime experiences with extraterrestrial and non-human intelligences. The Dual Soul Connection addresses aspects of spirituality, consciousness, metaphysics, and alien culture alongside scientific concepts of physics and advanced organic conscious technology, all within the framework of alien contact, highlighting our interconnection with a wider universal family. Judy Carroll was born in Queensland, Australia in 1952. Her family background is Creole, English, and Romani Gypsy. She left school to pursue a career as a professional flamenco dancer, following in the footsteps of her grandmother, who was a dancer and clairvoyant medium in the Romani tradition. Judy feels that this background has helped her to assimilate the encounters she's had with Greys since early childhood. 60 years of the ongoing and at times fully conscious encounters has given her a deep insight into this phenomenon, which is happening to many thousands of people worldwide. Being born into a Romani family has also given her insight into being different along fellow humans and its effect on the psyche. Full awakening about her connections to ETs came into 1983 at the age of 30, with a daytime encounter during which cellular Greys appeared to her in full daylight, and she recognized them as family. She was also given a massive download of information and advice regarding the mission being carried out on Earth, the part she was to play in it, and further studies she needed in order to undertake this role to the best of her ability. She's also authored 3 books: Extraterrestrial Presence on Earth, The Zeta Message, Human by Day, Zeta by Night. Sherry Wilde was born and raised in southern western Wisconsin and continues to call Wisconsin her home. She operated a successful real estate business specializing in sales, land development, and commercial renovations until 2008, when the recession hit. Things changed radically at this point, and Sherry's life unraveled quickly. She lost her business, her family, and most of her friends, and her wealth. Following the strong urge to retreat into solitude, she spent the next few winters in the desert. Inexplicably, in 2010, she found herself writing a book about her lifelong contact with beings from another dimension. These memories had been buried and kept out of her consciousness mind for most of her life, but now the layers began to peel away like the skin of an onion. The Forgotten Promise tells the story of how she went from being what she was, the ultimate victim, to understanding the true nature and purpose behind the extensive contact. Immediately upon agreeing to have the book published, Sherry was targeted. She has been poisoned, hit with directed energy weapons, ELF radiation, and mind control. This destroyed her health. Today, Sherry's working to heal her body, and although the attacks continue, she does her best to speak out about the Luciferian agenda that has been so prevalent upon this planet, as well as what she believes is really going on with the so-called abduction experience. So ladies, thanks for coming in, and feel really super privileged that you had, took the time off, and especially we're all quarantined right now, so this, I guess, gives us the best opportunity to have this chat. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Yanick.
Thank you, Yanick.
So the way we're going to do is a lot of people don't know what, well, some know about your stories, but can you give us a quick, maybe 5-minute brief, general idea of what you've been through from early childhood to up until now? Suzy, can you do that for us?
Okay, well, as you said in the brief, my experiences began in childhood, but I didn't really associate them with aliens or UFOs, which very little was known about in those days. In New Zealand, we knew the term flying saucer. But at 8 years of age, I had a sighting with my family, and that really changed my life, my worldview as a child. It was not something that could be explained away as a misidentified aircraft or a natural phenomenon. And from that time, I think my contact experiences of seeing golden beings in my room at night with no particular features, that really escalated from that time. And I became aware that of a lot of psychic things happening to me, although that wasn't the term I assigned to it, of course, as a child. But I could see colors around people. I could believe I could understand what they were thinking, which sometimes didn't match what they were saying, and other things like premonitions and seeing spirit animals and spirit people. Was quite quiet through my teenage years, really, and that's probably because of you go through puberty as a teenager, and you do external examinations, etc. So there are things that you need to go through on your own there. But as you mentioned, at age 20, when I was a young teacher, I had that crazy experience on a backcountry road where my car was lifted off the ground and taken up into a very large craft, and certain activities took place there. So I was thrown into the situation of researching both New Zealand sightings and also researching experiences that people were having that came to me via word of mouth. In 2000, after having spent about 20 years or less, little less than that, working with veteran UFO investigators in New Zealand, I started up UFOX NZ Research Network, which is a nationwide network to investigate New Zealand UFO sightings, and we have an archive of over 10,000 sightings. Through that, I've done quite a lot of public speaking, but the majority of the public speaking has actually been overseas in terms of my own contact experiences. I haven't done a lot of public speaking about that in New Zealand. I tend to speak about that overseas, largely because I have my own family here, and I want to respect their privacy and their right to lead life without, some of the comments that are made to people about people like us. So I've been speaking internationally since 1995, and at conferences. I've spoken in 8 countries now. And like Sherry, I have been subjected to threats and intimidation, especially when, as a UFO researcher, I was implemented letters to the Chief of Defence and lobbied him for the release of the New Zealand UFO files in 2010 and 11. So when I spoke at a conference in 2018, like Sherry, I had an attempt made on my life where I was sprayed with a substance, and 2 days later was in hospital close to death with blood, skin and lung infections, bacterial infections. So this is, we're reaching a time, I believe, as the ATs have told me and other people who were in a group of humans on board a craft at one stage, we're nearing a time where it can actually become quite dangerous for people like us. So we're 3 ladies in the middle to older age group who are speaking out about our experiences. We've each been through a lot to get to where we are today. And I think that's probably about a rundown on what I need to say. My experiences are ongoing. The nature of them has changed a little bit. And my favourite subject to talk about, apart from the dual soul aspect and consciousness, is alien technology that I have seen and used on board craft, which we are only just beginning to develop now. Thanks, Yanick.
Good, good. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing that part of technology. I've heard in the past. I've seen you and speak in 2017. So really looking forward to getting into that. So Sherry, could you do the same?
I will. My dog is
Oh,
acting up. It's the time of night. Right around this time of night, I always get company,
mm-hmm.
and almost always. And they always come in right over there, and he always sees them, so he's acting up a little bit about it. So
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, there's some visitors. So my life story, as it pertains to the ET thing, I was oblivious to my experiences also until I was about 37 or 38 years old. They'd been kept buried. And it's a strange thing that you have, those of us who have these experiences, at least in my storyline, you have encounters and you have these things happen, but they're just below the conscious level. Although some of in my experiences, like I had when I was 8 or 9 years old, and they took me up on the ship and showed me the planet being destroyed. I remembered that my whole life from the time I was little. I remembered it happening, but I never talked to anyone about it. I never said anything about it. I didn't, oddly enough, I mean, I was taken by an ET. He was clearly an ET, and he took me on a ship, and we went up above and we looked at the planet. I didn't connect the dots. I knew it was real, but I just never, I don't know how you do that. I don't even have words to describe how that happened. But anyway, so I did have those memories. I remember as I would walk to school some days and walk home from school as a little girl, I would come into a clearing in the woods and they would be there waiting for me. You know, I don't know. It's like you have this part of you that you block off, and it's there and you can access it, but you don't share it and you don't examine it too closely. You just accept it and you keep it over there, and it's separate from your earth life. And so I did have conscious recall of these experiences, but that's how it was. It was in a box. I always put it like it's in a box on a shelf in my mind, and kept labeled. I don't know what it was labeled. It wasn't labeled a dream. It wasn't labeled reality either. It was something in between, something different. It was my secret, I guess. So when I was 37, 38 years old, that's when my community experienced a UFO flap. And my girlfriend, she convinced me to go to that with her to hear what they had to say. And I was not interested at all. I had been blocked very much against UFOs or anything to do with that. I thought it was kind of a kooky subject. But I went with her, and when I was there, they showed pictures of some of the ships that had been seen in the community, and it jarred me. It just lit a fuse in me, and it's like my mind blew up, and all these memories as I was sitting there came rushing back. It was a really strange experience to have, and of course I had a missing time that I had gone through with my girlfriend, the same girlfriend who had taken me to that. That's why she drugged me along with her. She thought that I needed to go to it. And because she was there when I had 2 hours of missing time, and I had told her that I saw spacemen. I guess she said I called them spacemen. And I wanted her to come back and meet them because I really liked them, and I wanted her to see the ship and go on the ship with me. And she remembered all that, and I didn't remember it. And so everything changed after that. I connected with the people from the Center for UFO Studies. They convinced me to allow them to do a regression, because I did want to find out what happened to me during that 2 hours of missing time I'd had. That had started to bug me. As I look back now and I put the pieces together, what's come clear to me, very clear to me, is the harmonic convergence happened in 1987, August of 1987. We didn't have internet back then, so I didn't know what was happening. All I know is that I felt this intense energy, this amazing love and opening of my heart. And I didn't go to work for 3 days. I stayed home, and I left the house and I went up on the hill behind our house, and I just was up on that hill all day long. I don't know. The only thing I remember about being up there, because all of it's gone. All 3 days that I spent up there, there's no memory of it. All I remember is one day being up there and standing under a tree and looking up through the trees, and like I was looking for something, watching for something or whatever. But what I get is that I basically, rendezvoused with my ET family, my guys, and I was pretty much given my marching orders and told it's time, because it was like 2 or 3 months after that this whole UFO flap started, and the memories opened up, and from there it all took off from there, and my life changed dramatically. I no longer had a normal life. It just all changed.
Like many of us.
So that's
really.
many of us. Yeah. Really. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you. So Judy, could you do the same?
Yes. What the other two ladies have been saying really rings bells with me, because it's like as if we've got two brains in our head, and one of these brains is registering our conscious human reality, and the other brain is aware of something going on, but the two aren't joined together. And so therefore you've got all these missing things going on. Through my childhood, I didn't have very much conscious awareness of my connection. But now in hindsight, I realise I chose this because it's been my job to help a number of people who were going through the fear of ET contact. And I needed to experience that myself as a child, which I did. I knew there was something going on, but as Suzy was saying, here in Australia, no one had ever heard of ETs or UFOs or anything like that. We didn't have the Roswell event, for example, that you folks had in not in Canada, but at least in America. So there was no yardstick to compare my experiences with anyone else's. The earliest memory I have is of being taken up our street to supposedly board a train. They're holding the hand of a tall, thin woman. And after that, I couldn't put it together because I knew there was no train station up the end of our street. I now realise I was taken onto a ship. But I mean, as a child, I couldn't get my head around this. So at probably about age 15, I started having significant experiences. I remember having one of those body paralysis experiences around that time. And I started becoming aware of receiving guidance from a teacher who was not of planet Earth. I was very aware that this teacher was not human. And I used to ask him for help whenever I needed it. And at age 30 was when I had my very first conscious, full-on daytime conscious experience. So that's probably the one to focus on, because that was the time where I was informed, hey, look, you're living this double life. You're an ET as well as an Earth human. They were visibly aware, present in the room where I was lying. What actually happened, it was in the middle of an afternoon, and I felt like I was coming down with the flu. And I went upstairs to a back bedroom to lie down, and I was placed into the body paralysis state, and my third eye was activated, and I could see these three beings standing beside the bed. I didn't know anything about greys at that stage, but now I realise they were greys. I mean, I can remember what they looked like. And I was very aware of one of them being my teacher. And they told me, because we were living out on acreage in the country at the time, they told me it's time for you to stop hiding yourself away out here. It's time for you to get back to work. And I was given a massive download of information at that point and told that I would need to undergo a course of study, and we'd be moving back into town to enable me to do this. And this is exactly what happened over the next 3 years. We did move to town. I was provided completely out of the blue. I was told to learn Tai Chi, which was going to help me learn to meditate, so I could establish communication with them easier, because I'd been a dancer, so I was very physically oriented at that time. All these things came to pass. It was like as if they all just fell into place for me. I spent 8 years sitting in a meditation circle where I learned channeling and automatic writing. And I was also given the opportunity to learn Reiki, because that was another thing the Greys told me during this meeting in 1983, that I needed to learn a natural healing technique, and that this would be for my protection, but also I'd be passing it on to others. And all this has come to pass. I now teach Tai Chi and have been for about 30 years. I'm also a Reiki teacher and practitioner. also know how to meditate now. And over the years, I had a number of experiences where I was aware of being up on the ship, but very much as a grey and performing surgery and things on people, down, like humans who've been taken up there. So I'm very conscious of that side of it, which I think Suzy is as well, of actually being a grey up on the ship. Wasn't so much having things done to me, although I have had some operations and things done, but was more working on other people. In 1995, over in the UK, I visited a sacred circle over there known as the Rollright Stones. And 3 weeks after coming back to Australia, I was taken back there in astral form, laid down in the centre of the circle, and a needle about that long with a beautiful, beautiful blue crystal on the end, which I associate that colour with my teacher, was put into my third eye chakra. It was like an acupuncture sort of procedure. And that resulted in another download. And during that time, the Greys asked me to start writing books, but on this subject, but not from the human perspective, as most books had been written at that stage. They asked me to write the books from the ET perspective. And the 3 books, the Zeta Message, Human by Day, Zeta by Night, and my latest book, ET Presence on Earth, all resulted from this meeting and the amount of information that was downloaded into my mind during this time. It's just slowly trickled through. You get these massive downloads. I know Suzy talks about them in her book, and it often sometimes takes years for the information to slowly begin to trickle down. So that's basically my story in a nutshell.
Wow, thank you. Quick question. I think you said you had certain events happen in your childhood, then there was a gap up until the age of 30, I believe, and then there was nothing between that?
Well, there was, but I wasn't consciously aware of it. It was only after that I realised things had been going on. But the conscious experiences was being taken on a ship or up to a train station, which was a ship as a child. I was probably about 3 at the time. The next one was at age 15, where I was put into the paralysis state and I was aware of something going on, but I wasn't consciously aware. And then real conscious awareness came in at age 30.
Ah, strange, because when I was a kid, around the age of 4, I'd always tell my parents, well, my mom, that there was always people in my room at night. And but I only remember saying that, but a lot of the time. And then as soon as my brother was born, maybe a year later, everything stopped. And so I grew up like having a normal childhood. So I always put that as a childhood fears of the dark.
Yeah.
But as soon as I moved out, I finished college with my 2nd degree, and I moved out to another city. That's when I was on my own. This is when all the visions started to happen, and then it sort of trickled down and added on, and then the vision, other visions, the voices. Then I had a face appear to me looked like a mantid in my bedroom. Then I went to a medium, and she said that I was going to start dating in a year and a half this blonde girl, and which happened eventually. And it turned out that she was a British abductee that I met in northern Quebec, Canada. And like 2 days later, we called in a craft. It flew just above the house. I called in the same craft a week later at my parents' house in the woods. So, things tend to, like you said, sometimes there's gaps, but they're always happening. So I thought that was pretty interesting, though. So thank you. So I know you did go into a lot of detail already, but I have a series of questions, sort of general questions that I've jotted down for the listeners. Some might be close to what you said already, but hopefully we might be able to get into more detail as soon as we start. So let me see. So okay, are we in agreement that all of your events started happening when you were all kids?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to know. Did any of you go through regression or hypnosis to figure out if certain events were true or unblock certain events?
I didn't.
I did, but it took me a very long time. I had various researchers asking me to do regressions with them, presumably because they would like the information, but I resisted that. There was a lot of controversy at the time. You know, Dr. John Mack was talking about it, and Bud Hopkins and others, Dr. David Jacobs. So I wasn't too sure and too happy about it. So I resisted that for decades. But it wasn't until I was writing my book that Dr. Rudy Schild asked me to have some regressions. I had one or two prior to then, some prior to then, to fill in gaps, because I have quite extensive conscious memories of my experiences, and I used to write them down in detail, the technology, the way communications took place, what we were there for, etc. But there were some gaps that were missing, and I had regression on those. And under Dr. Schill's request, I had regressions with 3 different practitioners, so that it couldn't be said that you know, anything coming out could be assigned or aligned with one particular therapist. But I think the vast majority of my memories are natural memories, conscious memories. But it's interesting that a couple of experiences did come out that I had no memory of, and they were absolutely integral and vitally important to the nature of my book and what I was trying to convey with it. So I believe that I received assistance with that, and it was meant to be.
Nice. So Sherry,
I also, yeah, I underwent hypnosis. I had the memory of what I was looking to fill in were the 2 hours that were missing when I was 17. And so my girlfriend was a witness to that. There were other witnesses who were aware of the 2 hours of missing time. And I had the conscious memory of driving the car down the road and having it stall and rolling to a stop, and there being these men in the road. And I was 17 years old, and then all of a sudden 2 hours of missing time. I'm now 20 years later, I'm 37 years old, and it's starting to bother me. You know, why did I never look into that? What the hell happened during that 2 hours of time? I mean, how stupid was I to not want to know the answer to that? But it never crossed my mind. I never thought of it again. And my girlfriend thought of it, and I thought of it at the same time, because it was planned that way, I guess, meant to be. So I did undergo hypnosis. I wanted to do the hypnosis to find out what had occurred. I did not want the Center for UFO Studies or anybody with that kooky ET abduction stuff around. I had never heard of the abduction experience until this UFO flap came to my community, and then they started talking about it. And I thought it was just the weirdest thing that they think aliens would come and kidnap humans, you know. But Don Schmidt, he was the director at the time of the Center for UFO Studies, he was real patient with me, because I was very naive and I was pretty cocky, and nobody was going to tell me, you know, what I was going to do. So he was very gentle with me to ease me into allowing them to provide the hypnotist and to be there for support. And that's what finally convinced me to do it. They got the best hypnotist ever. I mean, Stanley Mitchell was just phenomenal, the guy who did the hypnosis. And they had a psychologist there, and, you know, they had lots of support. And it's good that I didn't go off and just do it on my own. It was traumatizing for me, because I was totally convinced that I was right and that nothing had occurred, except that I figured they were workmen, because I did recall that they were all dressed alike in these kind of gray blue one-piece uniforms or something. So I figured they were working on the highway or working on the electrical wires or something there. So when the regression happened, it was the best regression. No one has ever been able to put me under like that, ever. I was back there reliving it. Every detail was clear and crisp, and I was really living it. So it was pretty remarkable. well, I tried to pick it apart after it was done, but the truth be told, it was so clear to me at the time that I was having the regression that it was hard to find any fault in any of it. It wasn't like some regressions I've had, because I've gone back since then to Stanley Mitchell has passed away, so he's gone. So I've tried to find other hypnotists who could get me to that level so I could relive some of the other experiences I've had, just because out of curiosity, because I have missing pieces. And no one has ever been able to get me under. That kind of hypnosis doesn't make me comfortable. I feel like you're making it up kind of as you're going. Now, it could be that I'm blocked again, because I did get a visit from the Men in Black. After the second time I was regressed, I went down for a third regression where I was going to investigate. We were going to investigate what happened. I had a day long. I was missing for. I went missing for 7 hours when I was about 3 months pregnant, and I remember them coming into the room. I remember them putting their hands on my shoulder and on me going with them. And then I remember them being there when they put me back. I was in the kitchen when they took me. They put me back in the bedroom on the bed, upside down on the bed. And Aurora, this hybrid who's with them a lot of the time, she was there with me when I came to. And she was just there to calm me down because I was very upset when I woke up. And my husband was laying on the floor. It was just a bizarre thing. And so I wanted to find out what happened during that 7 hours of missing time. But the Men in Black came and they threatened me. And they told me that I was not ever to undergo hypnosis. I was not ever to, go back and capture these memories. And I was not ever to talk about it. And they threatened me. And I suppose that's, me writing the book and then going out and talking about it is probably why I've been attacked. But the regression works. I don't recommend it. People email me all the time and they ask me to recommend somebody and they ask me if they should do it. And I almost always, my advice is no, unless you can't live without knowing what is behind that door. If it's bothering you so much that you can't get on with your life, then you probably need to do it. But otherwise, I always recommend don't open the door. Don't look there. Some things you're better off not knowing.
Wow.
Because it can really tear it apart. Hmm?
So can anyone go under? My question is, can anybody have a regression and go deep enough to remember, whatever happened? Because I tried it a few years ago. Of course, the hypnotist was, the whole thing happened over Skype, so I wasn't able to go deep enough, or maybe perhaps I was too stressed. But can anybody go deep enough into a deep state to actually remember what happened?
I think if the hypnotist is good enough, if the hypnotist is good enough. Stanley Mitchell, I was there a long time with him. We were there, and Don Schmidt will tell the story about how they almost gave up because he just kept trying and trying. And I told him, I said, I'm very strong-willed. You're not going to get me under. Mm-hmm. Not that I don't want to, but I'm just, I'm very strong-willed. And he did. He had trouble. And then all of a sudden he said, okay, we're ready to start. And I said, I'm not hypnotized. And he said, yes, you are. And I said, I'm not hypnotized. I don't know what I expected. I guess I thought it was going to be like out. And he said, you're hypnotized. And he said, you want me to prove it to you? And I said, yeah. He said, give me your hand. Gave him my hand. And he took this long needle. And he said, I'm going to stick this needle through the palm of your hand and you're not going to feel it. And I was like, okay. Because I was under hypnosis. So I did. I said, okay. And I watched him stick the needle all the way through my hand. And he said, do you feel that? And I said, no. And he said, that's because you're under hypnosis. Well, and sure enough, and I was. And he started taking me back to that day. And I was reliving it. As I sat in the chair, I was driving the car. I had my hands up like I was driving the wheel. And when the car stalled, I pushed in the clutch. And I reached for the key to turn it off and to pop the clutch again. I mean, I went through all the motions when they took me on board the ship, and it was cold. I got goosebumps. Don told me how, my skin, I got goosebumps. He said, you were reliving it, just really reliving it. And so it was a really good session. And I've had hypnosis probably from 5, 6, 7, 8 different people have tried. They can't get me anywhere near to that state. Not anywhere near. I wish I could. because that was fascinating to me. I would love to go back, and I have several encounters that I remember certain parts of them. I remember different sketchy things, but I can't remember like from start to finish. Like he took me through that whole experience, like every detail. That was really something that was very interesting. So
thank you.
I think anybody can go under. Yeah, you can go under if the hypnotist is good, if they're good. But I've never seen anybody like him. He was president of the American Hypnosis Society. He developed battlefield hypnosis.
Wow.
Where they do surgery using hypnosis on the battlefield. So yeah.
I'd like to add something to that when you've talked to Judy.
Sorry?
When you've talked to Judy, I'd like to add something to the hypnosis discussion.
Okay, well, Judy, did you have something to say regarding that?
No, I've never undergone any regression for hypnosis.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes? Okay. Well, well, let's say next question.
Hang on, can I just add something there, Yanick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with what Sherry has just said. I think that it's important to note that in our time, if I can put it that way, of discovering our experiences and investigating them, there was a lot of talk about hypnosis, and a lot of researchers were putting pressure on people in our age group and our experience group to have that regression. And of course now it's actually held against us by some sectors of the UFO field who say, oh no, for example, FREE, the group that's formed FREE, won't accept anything from regression. So we're sort of caught in this netherworld where we were encouraged to do it, and now it's kind of reviled. But I do agree with Sherry that people who come to me and say, can you recommend someone? I say, no, my recommendation is don't have it. Not that it's not necessarily successful, but because of the controversy that still rages out there about it. And I'm fortunate that a lot of my memories were recorded in early speeches before I ever had regression. So, you know, I can prove that I have this good conscious memory. And that I filled in the gaps. But also I'd like to mention the integrity of a lot of the hypnotherapists out there. There are some around that I know are claiming to have qualifications they don't have, and people are going to them under the belief that they have those professional qualifications, and they don't. So I think there's going to be a lot of exposure in the field over the next few years. And, you know, we've got what I consider to be unethical things happening where people are doing regressions over Skype, etc. And from a viewpoint of a teacher, I think that's very dangerous. As Sherry said, under her circumstances, she was well supported. It was very professional. She had people there in case she had a problem or went into some kind of distressed or shocked state. How can that exist when you're in another country and someone's doing a regression over Skype? So I think there are now a lot of question marks around the integrity around this, and I think that, like Sherry, I say to people exactly what she said. If you've got a burning question, well, fine, you can go and find someone, but be careful to check their credentials. Apart from that, just let life lead you to what you are meant to be doing, and I think all three of us already have mentioned that that has happened in our lives, and it happens to us all.
Okay. Thank you. Wow. So my next question would be, have you, from early childhood, had ET medical examinations, and the nature of those examinations, did they change throughout up until now? So
who are you starting with?
Well, whatever, whoever, Suzy.
Okay.
Yeah,
yes, I have. I had a horrific car accident in 1974, and soon after that I was taken on board craft, and I had some implants put in which helped with balance and pain. I had some bad spinal injuries and fractured vertebra, etc. So that really helped me. I was in my first year of teaching. That really helped me get through those first few years. I've also been taken on board when I got a virus. When I spoke at one of the old UFO congresses in 1999 in Laughlin in Nevada, I came home with what was called Gulf War syndrome, mycoplasma atypical bacteria virus combination, mutation, and was very ill with that. Again, I was taken on board craft, and some of the technology that I describe in my speeches was used on me to correct certain things and make me aware of certain things. I've been on board craft when they've used technology that can see into the body. That's another thing I talk about, and I've been gathering corroborative evidence from medical people and also other experiencers who've seen and experienced this particular technology. So as Judy said, I've also, as Judy has, also have done healing activities on board craft in the body of a grey, carrying out healing sessions at night with groups of humans. So there's been quite a wide variety of healing related activities that I've either taken part in or witnessed and used and seen the technology available that they have.
Okay, Judy, your turn.
Yes, I was actually taken up on a ship, oh my goodness, quite a while ago, many years ago. An implant was placed into my heart chakra. I can remember that happening. And it was interesting because after they did it, they asked me to help them to shift this big cabinet thing. And I couldn't work this out for a long time because I thought, but the greys can levitate things. Why do they need me to help, shift them, this thing? But what I realised afterwards, because the implant was working like on an energy level in my heart chakra, they wanted to make sure everything was working okay with me. And it was quite funny because when it came time for me to go back, I can remember just about clinging onto the sides of the ship. No, I don't want to go. And I was crying, I don't want to go, I want to stay here. And they were almost physically pushing me. No, you've got to go back, you've got to go back. But I had a very, very interesting experience up there, probably around about 1999, when I was either sitting up on a table or standing behind it, and my human body was actually on the table in front of me. And I was actually training a couple of small greys to use like a laser cutter thing. And they were using it on the lower part of my right leg, and I can remember it so clearly. They were trying to get it around, and I was saying, no, you've got to turn my leg, you won't be able to get it that far, you've got to turn the leg, and I was guiding them. Anyway, the next morning I woke up with a vague memory of being up there, but I couldn't really remember what had been going on. And that day we were going to the beach, so I was going to apply some suntan lotion to my leg. And lo and behold, I found this long cut, probably about that long, around the lower part of my right leg. And there were blisters all along. It had been cauterized. And as soon as I saw it, I had this really clear memory of guiding them as they were doing this. There was no pain involved whatsoever and healed up very quickly. And I'm just so sorry, back then we didn't have cameras on our phones and things that I could have taken a photo of, but I didn't have a camera. And it was extremely impressive. It's long cut with blisters all along it. Another very, very clear memory that I have, again, of being up on the ship as a grey and putting my head around the corner of one of the rooms used as a clinic. I've actually spoken about this on a lot of interviews. There was a human man lying on the table, and he was in a semi-paralysed state, but he managed to turn his eyes to the side and saw me coming in. And the look of absolute horror on his face was just beyond words. And I can remember all my reactions and emotions at the time. I felt really frustrated. And I was trying to say to him, look, it's okay, we're not going to hurt you. You've been here plenty of times before. We're doing something to help you. And I could not get it through. It was like he had a cocoon of fear wrapped around him. And I was virtually telepathically shouting at him, it's okay, calm down. Couldn't get through to him. So we knocked him out, someone placed their hands on his head to send him to sleep. And what the operation involved was taking an implant out of his head that had been put in by a negative group down here. And I can remember clearly I had two other helpers with me, putting my long grey fingers down inside his brain, disconnecting this thing and taking it out, turning to the other two and saying, that's good, we've got it out, he should be safe now. And I can still remember it clearly to this day. So they're my healing experiences up on the ship.
Wow. Thank you. So Sherry, your turn, please.
Well, from the time I was a little girl, they have been taking me on the ship and monitoring my body. They told me they needed to do that. They said that that my body had some weaknesses in it, and it was hard for my body to hold the frequency of who I was, or something along those lines. And they told me I had weakness in my legs, and so they would have to come in quite often to help assist me with that. I was also part of my mission here is to be part of the hybrid program for my group, and so they would pick me up when I became a teenager and on up into my 20s and 30s. I was very, very active with that, very active. They harvested a lot of eggs from me, and I have a lot of hybrid children. I can't remember, I think something like, there's quite a few of them. I think there's like 47 or 48 of them or something last I know, but they have more eggs stored. I remember being on the ship and seeing where where all that took place, and where the babies were in the incubators or in the little areas where they were growing. I remember very clearly being on the ship and being aware of the children. So I got to stay involved a little bit with some of my children. So that part was a big part of it for me. As far as me, they have always come in to do Reiki on me up until recently. They would come in and doing Reiki. In about 2000 and, let's see, it would have been about 2009 or so. No, later than that. I had my first Draco visit me, I think in 2009, 8 or 9. And then they came back in about 2012 or so. And 5 of them came by and asked if my partner and I would agree to let them work with us. They said that during this time of ascension, they wanted to go from service to self to service to others. And they needed someone to minister to. Could they minister to us? So we agreed to that. And so they came in and they started doing Reiki on us, which was altogether different than what my guys did. So, you know, and I'm not clear, and this is one of the things I'd like to be regressed about, because I'm not sure, you know, many people have told me that I was being lied to and that you can't trust them. Mm-hmm. But I actually think that the ones who attacked me were not the Draco. I believe the Draco might have been doing positive things with me. We were getting amino acid shots. Every morning we'd wake up and we had these 3-pronged injection sites in our body, because the attacks on me had started. And they were countering it with the Reiki and the amino acid shots. But I was also getting, one morning I woke up and there was blood splattered all over the sheets. And when I demanded to know what that was about, because I said I'm not supposed to have implants. No one's supposed to be doing implants to me except my guys. Well, they showed me somebody was coming in and they were putting an implant in, which I've got, the side of my head is very sore still and raw from it, because they would put it in there, and right away the next night or very soon after, this other group would come in and take it out. And then they'd come back, they'd put it in, and then they'd take it out. It was just like, I was like a ping pong during this time, initially when these attacks were at their worst. So I have memories of that, and I was actually shown it. And then they also were injecting something up the nostril as well, which was quite painful. I've had them here a lot lately. They, because I kicked everybody out after they told me that they were putting in what they called a Trojan horse implant into my brain, into my head, which was to take control of me, which was part of the attack. So when all that was going down, everybody leave, I just kicked everybody out. Well, the only ones who listened to me were the benevolent ones. So they went away, and then so then it got really bad. So lately now, what has happened, the last thing I had here was about probably 6 weeks now. 6 weeks or so. They came in with a big machine, with this machine. And if you heard me on the interview I did with Grant Cameron recently, my doctor had wanted to reset my brain using an anesthesia because I'm suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and everything, and the damage to my brain from the poison and everything. So he wanted to reset my brain, and I looked into it, and it looked like it was okay, so I agreed to have it done. Well, then there was this intervention that came in while they were doing it. This entity came through, and she demanded that they stop doing that to me, and it was quite an experience. It was, the whole clinic now is, people up there really, if they didn't think I was weird before, they really do now, because I was speaking a different language, you know, and that was really, really weird. That was even spooky for me. But that night, after I came home from that whole thing, I get into bed, and before I can even close my eyes, comes this machine, and it's a big machine, and it comes down through the ceiling into my sitting room off my bedroom, which is just a small little sitting area. And it's got these bright, bright lights on it. And that machine, they used that machine. I was going to get out of bed. I was excited to see it. I thought it didn't look like, it wasn't a ship, so I knew it wasn't there to take me home, although I was hoping for that. But I was threw back the covers. I was going to go over and get out of bed and go check it out and see what it was. And I passed out immediately. And the next morning I woke up and I had the memory. It wasn't even a memory. I knew that machine, they had come in and they had reset my brain. They used that machine somehow to do whatever they did to me. And I felt the difference immediately, because the damage to my brain was pretty extensive. What I've been told is that it would have killed me. Of course, you know, if they want to kill you, they can kill you. And they did want to kill me, but I guess I was protected. I sometimes get mad at my guys because I'm like, why didn't you protect me more? Why didn't you this or that? But they said, well, why do you think you're not in worse condition than what you are? Is because we were there, you know, we kept you safe. So they did come in and they reset my brain so that I could concentrate. I mean, I have not been able to concentrate. I couldn't meditate for the longest time, and I used to be a very serious meditator. I used to be able to do self-healing and do alchemy work, and I couldn't do any of that because it takes concentration and focus to do that. And I didn't have that. I just lacked it. It was just, my brain was just mush. So I'm grateful to them for that. I kind of wish I had Suzy or Judy's ET family. They sound like they're a little more hands-on, a little more into the healing and fixing things. My guys, not so much. But, you know, they've kept me alive, which I guess is okay, maybe. But I'd rather be in good health. You know, they have the ability to do it. I'm not sure why they tell me it's because I'm supposed to heal myself so that I can teach that to others and use that as a teaching tool. So I'm working on doing that. Ever since I had that reset about 6 weeks ago, I'm hoping to be able to do that. So I've had a lot of extensive stuff with them as far as physical stuff, some good, some bad. I don't know who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, but I suspect the bad guys, the ones who were doing the attacks on me, I'm quite sure are not off-world. I don't think they're ETs. I just don't believe that they are. So as far as I can see, the ETs have pretty much been the good guys in all this.
Okay, wow.
So that's been my experience.
Thank you. This is a general question for all of you. This is regarding an experience I had in 2016. I did a C5 on December 31st, 2015. And normally I get some form of contact, let's say, or something happens. But you know, that night it was really cold. I stayed outside maybe for half an hour. Nothing happened. So I go back inside and I'm like super sad, start saging the house. And I was alone. My dad was with his girlfriend at the time. And so I go to bed. And during the night, while I'm sleeping, I get this electric shock just above the ear on my head. Not the behind the ear where some might get implants, but it's just above the ear, but behind the head. just behind the ear. And I wake up in a shock. So I thought somebody was in the room. So I started kicking in the air. Thought there was an intruder. I turn around and I look at the clock, and it was 1:11 a.m. So the only info I was able to find regarding that is when they take you and they say they bring you back, and they give you an electric shock to the head to wake you up from whatever state I was in. So I'm not sure. Have you talked to anyone who might have gone through the same experience? Any of you?
Of waking up with that electric shock feeling?
Yeah.
Yes, I have come out of a contact experience where I've been taken somewhere when I was in my 20s and 30s, not so much now, but back then. And for example, when my car was lifted off the country road and had some missing time, that's one that I investigated in regression. But I consciously recall a moment when I seemed to come to and found the car floating. It was being held on a tractor beam, and then it was put down on the road. It was now dark. And just as I kind of woke up, if you want to put it that way, I had the experience of a loud clapping buzz noise. And as soon as you said above the ear, that's exactly where it was. It was like someone clapped loudly right there by my ear. And I've experienced that a number of times with those kinds of incidents where you're being returned. And on some occasions, you'll be put straight to sleep. On other occasions, depending what you're doing, you'll get that clapping feeling, and then the conscious memory goes on. For example, when you're traveling somewhere. On another occasion, my former husband and I experienced seeing a whole valley lit up with light, and then up out of the valley came this craft emitting bright light. He went into a trance-like state, and I was taken on board. When I was brought back, there was that moment of sitting in the car, and that time comes together like that. There's that big clapping noise, like, as you said, sort of like an electric shock. Oh, you wake up. Oh, what are we doing here? Come on, let's get going. And off you go on your journey. And at that point, until you start having the flashbacks and the feeling that something happened, you don't realize that there's been that missing time, but there's that wake up feeling, which doesn't make sense. It's like this incongruous thing that has happened, that is like a signal that something's happened. And after it's happened many, many times, you definitely understand what must have just taken place. And that's an indicator of it.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
It's interesting, Suzy, that you put it that way. Because when they bring me back, I have the encounters at night, when they take me from the bed, those encounters, and bring me back to bed, there's that cracking, that loud cracking, like a gigantic bat hitting a ball, and then a flash of light. And I've always figured that what that was them leaving. Because when they leave, sometimes when the ship, it goes up and then, and if you've ever watched them do it, they drop me out of the bottom of it, onto the ground. And I'm looking up and I see the bottom of the craft, and then they go up fast, and then when they do that whole really, really fast in a split second, there's that cracking sound and that flash of light. So I haven't experienced it being in my head. It's just the experience of them leaving, and it's always kind of a cool thing when they do it. The dog always jumps up and barks and goes crazy, and so I know that it's real. And I asked him once why you do that, and he said, so that you know that you were with us, so that you know that it's not a dream. He said that's he calls them markers. He said that's a marker on your conscious memory, so that you don't get up in the morning and go, oh, I had this really strange dream last night. He said we want you to know that wasn't a dream. So interesting.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Now, since the beginning, we've been talking about grays and ships. Could you describe to the viewers what you actually saw? Let's say, I know that Sherry's been in contact with Da and Judy with Zed, as I believe. Could you describe them physically to see if there's do they look the same, or are they slightly different? And what type of craft that you've been on and seen in person, let's say. So, Judy, yeah, please.
Yeah. What many people don't understand, there are many different grey cultures. The Zetas are just one. I always felt uncomfortable referring to mine as Zetas. My publisher wanted to, so that people would sort of understand that more or less what I was talking about. But they've always describe themselves as greys. I feel more comfortable using that term because it's more all-encompassing. The ones that I work mainly with the tall ones, but I have seen the small ones around. They're like helpers. And they're just a classic grey. They have a sort of a blue-grey coloured skin, and the eyes up in the corners like that, rounded at the outer corner, coming down to a point at the nose and sort of wrapping around the head. The skin feels very soft, almost like dolphin, the touch of a dolphin. My grey teacher, Maris, actually gave me a face and throat massage once because I've always had trouble. The greys don't have a movable lower jaw, and I seem to have brought this in slightly into my physical human body. I've always had trouble with opening my mouth. I can't open my mouth wide. I have a little bit of trouble with physical speech because I'm more used to working with telepathy up there. And I actually was made to learn elocution at school to help me to learn to speak out more. And on one occasion, Maris came in and gave me a massage, and he was working all around the outside of my mouth. And then these long, long grey fingers go right down into my throat, massaging all inside. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was quite pleasant, almost like being at the dentist, but pleasant enough, there was no pain. Sometimes he was in front of me, other times I was sort of leaning back against him, and when the greys do healing, they tend to press fairly hard, so he was down there pressing really hard. And I telepathically asked him, you know, what are you doing? Because I don't have problems with my teeth or anything. And he said, I'm massaging your face to try and relax the muscles. And as I say, his hands had a lovely soft, it felt like a human touch, but a little bit more dolphin-like. So that's been my experience with them, just the very classic looking greys.
Okay, thank you. Sherry, please, your turn.
Well, I'm working with 3 different groups, and some are more they're human looking, but Da is when I asked Da, because my publisher also asked me, in the book I described the abduction that took place when I was 17, and in there I asked them where they're from, and they do this classic thing, show you the star map, and they say that they're from Andromeda, and but I describe them as greys, and I actually in the book I call them greys, and so the publisher said, they can't be from Andromeda if they're greys. And I said, why? And he said, well, if they're greys, they must be Zeta, and they have to come from Zeta Reticuli. Well, I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. And I said, well, I don't know. I only know what I know. And I said, they look like greys, and so that's what I'm calling them. But I said, they are from Andromeda. And he said, well, could you get clear on it? And I said, well, how would you like me to do that? And he said, ask them. And I said, okay. So I did. The next time I saw him, I was with Da, and I said, my publisher wants to know, are you what we would call, are you a gray? Are you a Zeta? And he looked at me kind of funny, and he said, well, that would not best describe the truth of who I am. And I said, well, you look like a gray, what, you know, are you a gray? And he said, I am what you would call an etheric being. That is, I do not have a body. And he said, this is a container that I wear when I come into your world because I must have a body in order to do the work that I do. But he said, I don't have a body as you perceive it to be. And I said, okay. I said, well then, who are you? What are you? Where do you come from? And he said, I am a voyager of the universe, going where needed in service to the Creator. And I said, okay, that was it. You know, and I've never been interested to ask them where, I mean, that's the only time I ever asked them that. It never occurs to me to ask them where they're from, any of them. They could be Pleiadians, they could be Andromeda. I don't know, I think they might be Syrian. I don't know, it doesn't seem to matter to me, but I know people like to know what group you're working with, but I don't know. But he said they're not greys. He said he did go on to tell me that there's lots of different, one once you get above the 5th dimension, you go to the 6th, 7th, and 8th, you get up to the 6th dimension and higher, they're almost always, they're not going to have bodies. And he said, so if they're coming in from the 4th and 5th dimension, that's different. But he said, most of us we do not have bodies. And so we do use these containers that are called what you call the Zeta containers, the bodies. And he said there are many different variations of them. And I was doing an interview with Mel Fabregas on Veritas Radio when he said, well, he said, why do they use those? And I said, well, he told me that they're highly practical. You know, they're very functional, and so that's why they like to use them. And he said, but why don't they use a human body? Because then they would fit in better and they wouldn't scare people so much. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. Because every time I see him at first, I used to, not so much anymore, but I used to be afraid every time because they erase your memory. So then every time they come back, it's like the first time again until you remember, and you go through that every time. And so they scared the bejesus out of me. And so Mel said, you know, they shouldn't do that. They should wear a human body. And I said, well, I'll ask them why they don't do that. So I asked them that the next time I saw him. And I said, well, you know, Mel, that's a good idea. Mel said he wanted to know, you know, why don't you wear a human body? He said, oh, a human body? He said, that's a highly complicated system. And I said, well, but wouldn't it work better? And he said, no. He said, you know, the Zeta body is highly functional and much easier to use. And he said, so you think that I scare you? He said, you think I'm scary looking? And I said, yeah. I said, you know, you scare me. Every time I see you for the first time, you scare me. And he said, well, you know, you're scary too. And I said, excuse me? And he said, well, you scare us too. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, when you do that thing you call smile, he said, it looks like you're going to eat us. He said, you humans are very scary when you smile. And I thought that was pretty funny on his part. So my guys, I've seen everything from the tall whites to the mantis, to the grays, I mean, you name it. I mean, they've all come through my house at one time or another, it seems like. The Draco are beautiful. They're probably my favorite to look at, in all honesty. So.
Okay, wow. Yeah, you humans tend to want to label things. It makes them easier to, I guess, to cope with. Maybe it's less fearful, but still, yeah, thank you. So yeah, Suzy, please.
Well, most of my contact has been with the Greys, but not just. I've seen what they call the root race of the Greys, which was an extremely old, wizened being that I saw much shorter than the short Greys even, and they're very, very rarely seen by humans. But there was a situation where I was introduced to one. Then there's the Greys that Judy has talked about, and they don't just have the grey skin, they have mottled fawns and browns, and their skin to me feels like suede is the best way that I can describe it, and mixtures of the greys. So greys, I grew up as a child being in playrooms on the craft with a lot of greys that were mixtures with other species. So you had the blue eyes and you had different shaped eyes, etc. Then I've seen the mantis being and worked with those on a craft, particularly with healing, but they are also working behind the scenes on the agenda or the programs that I describe in my book for humans. And then as well as that, I've had contact with the tall human-looking, very graceful human-looking beings, I suppose, that you would, if you saw them in the street, they'd look like very tall, elegant, long-limbed humans, but in all other respects, very much like us. People have said, well, are they from our future? I don't know. I didn't ask them that. But all of those species are working together with an agenda for assisting humanity at this time. I haven't seen any reptilians, but I have seen a grey and a mantis being that showed me his grey dual soul. So Judy and I talk about the dual soul, the blended soul, as Judy calls it, that is able to tap into human and grey intelligence or consciousness at the same time, or alternately. And so I know that there are ET races that have the same capacity, so that they're able to use the skills of either species in whatever work they're doing. I had a lot of contact and continue to have contact throughout my life with a small grey that I called RJ, nicknamed him from childhood. And I called him that because occasionally he would make a very guttural sound in his throat that sounded like the letter R being mixed with the letter J. And to a child's ear, it sounded like RJ, but it was a very guttural sound that I can't reproduce with human vocal cords. So that became his nickname, RJ. As a kid, I always saw him as like a brother or a cousin on board the craft, and he has had a great influence in my life, as well as a tall grey that I nicknamed the grandfather. I've talked about this particular entity a lot in my speeches. He has been a part of helping me plan out things that I'm doing in my life, programs that I'm in on board craft, and has been a real guidance and a teacher in many ways. I agree with both Judy and Sherry in what the kinds of experiences they have had. And like Sherry, I've never asked certain questions of them because I've kind of grown up with them. I have accepted the way they are, and I have had curiosity about a lot of things. I did ask on one occasion where they came from, and I was quite pleased to hear Sherry's answer to that question to her crowd, because I got a similar answer, and that was that they travel throughout universes and that they go wherever they're needed to give help, and they're here at this time assisting us. So yeah, like Judy, I have seen the greys transform into a being of light. So I sort of quite amused, if I can put it that way, sometimes when I hear that competitiveness that you sometimes hear humans have, you know, my alien is better than yours sort of style. Mine's a light being and yours is only a grey in their third dimension, etc. But I've seen these form into a being of light and say, well, this is how we appear when we work in other dimensions, and we're just showing you another form that we can take on. And on one occasion, I was in a room with 7 other humans and a whole lot of greys and other species of greys, mixtures, and the mantis beings, who were encouraging us to let ourselves go and let ourselves disintegrate into that light form. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it. The human ownership of the body and not wanting to let go like that, even though they'd instructed us and encouraged us for years, we just couldn't do it. But we saw them taking on other forms. So it is quite clear that the grey form or the manted form is not necessarily their static or their always form. They can transform into other forms and species, if you want to put it that way.
Okay, thank you. Judy, I think you wanted to add something to that earlier.
Yeah, a few things. This actually brings up, back in 2000, I was called in to help out a family here who were having very, very full-on ET encounters, and the mother of the family, Helene Kay, is the co-author of the Zeta Message. Anyway, her daughter, Kira, was having massive full-on conscious experiences, and a tall grey by the name of Horus came into their house. He used to come and visit on a regular basis. Their Labrador dog got to know him and used to come in and welcome him. It was lovely. And on one occasion, Helene asked Horus through Kira, what would you like us to call you? You know, do you want to be known as Zetas or angels or ETs or what? And Horus's answer was, look, we don't really mind. We don't like alien. What we would really like you to call us is family. And I thought, this was just lovely. And in the process of our contact experiences, Horus started teaching us about a thing called the human ladder. And my teacher, Maris, expanded on it. And what the human ladder is, it's a cycle of evolution through what the greys call galactic levels. And all these they're not places as such, they're levels of conscious awareness. And this is what human evolution is about, working our way up, evolving through these 10 levels of conscious awareness with the first one on planet Earth being able to access 10% or approximately 10% of our conscious awareness, whereas right up the top of the ladder they can access 100%. And this amount of conscious awareness that we can access is intrinsically linked into the amount of DNA that we have activated. Now, this is bringing us into the fact that it's only the lower levels of the human ladder where people have physical form and live on planets. And this is why a lot of people down here want to know, they love to be able to label, oh, they're from Zeta Reticuli, they're from the Pleiades, you know, they're from this, they're from that. But a lot of the higher ETs, and I very much include the Greys in this, have moved beyond this need to live on a planet and have a label. They've moved beyond that need for physical manifestation and expression. And the Grey form, which was originally an insectoid form, is absolutely perfect for any higher beings to use because of the fact that it's absolutely ideal for space travel. So when they have to come to a planet like Earth to carry out physical work, they use that form. And there's always 3 reasons behind everything, the Greys have always told us. And one of the reasons behind them appearing on Earth, and I know interviewers have asked me that too, well, why do they come here? Because they know we're scared of this form. Why they take this form is to try and push Earth humans past this outer physical appearance. We've got to move past that. This is part of our evolution, is to be able to move past physical appearance. And so it's basically a lesson to show humans that, hey, there are some out there who look very, very different. You don't have to necessarily be in Earth human form. And in fact, I can remember Horus or Mars or one of them saying, you know, you think we look strange. If you saw some of the beings out there in the universe, you'd realize how very ordinary looking we are.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Since we were talking about it's like the spirit form, there was when I was able to call in my second craft over my dad's house. I was able to, my mother and my dad were able to come outside and see it, and because of that, my dad started having experiences. Okay, and one time he had the flu and he was sleeping downstairs. My mom was on the first floor. He was in the basement. And he woke up, he was lying on his back, and this golden 4-inch orb comes in through the bedroom window and starts moving about from one end to the room and back, and then it flew out the window. Would that be, can we interpret that as a soul coming in? Or it could be some form of technology that came into my dad's bedroom?
Yeah, from what I understand, it's just somebody in their light body.
Okay.
So, you know, people see orbs. Sometimes it's a dead relly who's passed over, or it might be an ET, or it might be a spirit guide.
Okay.
The Greys often take that form as a light orb.
Okay, because
I think you've spoken about that, haven't you, Suzy? I remember you talking about that.
Yes, yeah. At the age of 8, I was introduced to a room of about 30 coloured orbs, and I was told that they were going to assist me in the work that I would do in the future, that they'd come in their soul state on the craft that night to be in the room with me and meet me. Some of them had already incarnated into humans, and some were still floating around there waiting to incarnate after me. So some would be older and some would be younger, but they would all be a part of my working family, if I can put it that way. And certainly there's 4 of them now that I have recognized in life, because as they were brought to me one at a time, they conveyed into my mind's eye or my consciousness images of how they, you know, how we would be in that future life. So I saw glimpses of them, what they would look like. I saw glimpses of situations and felt emotions and other memories, other features that were imprinted on my memory as a child, which I would recall when I was older. And so there's this handful of people so far that I've completely identified, that I saw images of, or simply heard their name and knew that that person was important, that I had to contact them or they would contact me, which has happened. So yeah, what you described, Yanick, is more likely to be a soul. And as Judy said, I've seen the greys as well in that form, coming to get me at night and coming to take the grey form out of my body and leaving the human behind. So, yeah, I agree with what Judy said.
Suzy, I remember in your book, you were talking about when you met your first, well, your son on the craft. Could you get into that?
Yes, again, when I was 8, it seems to be a year where so many things happened, and I was in the playroom, what I describe as a playroom, with a lot of other ET and human children learning to do things with the mind, and I was approached by a senior grey, and asked if I would like to meet another child. I said yes. Was taken along a corridor by him and into an empty room. And told we would have to wait. So we did wait, and soon 2 greys came in with what looked like a big glowing blue beach ball floating between them. So a large ball of light, very electric looking and sparkly. And I was a bit disappointed because I was expecting a kid that I'd be able to play with, but instead they brought in this ball of light. And the grey then did a terrific download into my mind as a child. 3 different strands that all arrived simultaneously. So I guess this most simple one was just, we bought this child, it's going to be a child, it's come to meet you. So that was a very simple one for an 8-year-old to understand. Then a huge amount of information that unfolded in my consciousness years later, and then the simple message again for the child, the beginning simple, the end simple. Okay, you can play together now, we're going to leave you. And at that point, all of that huge amount of information just faded, and I was in this room with a ball of light to play with. So after a few minutes, I felt that we were communicating telepathically. So the soul state was through consciousness communicating with me. And I'd been told that this ball of light would be my son, that I would grow up, get married, I'd have a child, the first child would be a son, and this soul would inhabit that body. So this soul would eventually be the soul of my future son. It was far too much for me to absorb as a child, and I recall just being thrilled to bits that I had this ball of light to play with each time, or many times that I went on board the craft to establish that relationship. They told me that the learning and education I would have on board craft was quite extensive, but that this soul was already receiving an extensive education on the craft in its soul state. Then once the child was born, the child would then go on board as I had done, and would receive a far more extensive education that I had, and that this child would have important things to do in the future, as many others like him would have. And they were particularly concerned and focused on the fact that this soul and I establish an excellent rapport before it even incarnated into the body of a child. So the connection is very deep and strong. And, I describe in my book the 3 waves of souls that are incarnated at this time. And he is part of what I call the 3rd wave. And I think they'll be the game changers and decision makers of the future.
Okay, thank you. We were talking about container bodies earlier on. Now, have you seen, because some experiencers, they tend to describe what they see as human bodies or human clones within in tubes that could be used as a container for a soul swap. Have you seen something similar?
Are you talking to me or?
Yeah, all 3 there. Sorry, yeah.
No, I haven't.
Yeah,
No.
Yes, I have. I've been on the ship, and when I've switched out, I remember leaving my body in like it was a container. It was up against the wall, kind of like it's like a mummy thing, or a telephone booth, or whatever you want to call it. It's very small, very tight. And I actually left my body there, and there was a whole row of them, of the humans who had left their bodies there, while we went into our ET form. And there's different ways of doing that, you know, but that was the one that was shocking to me. And when I was 19 when that happened, and when I came back to my house, to my bed, because they filled the container up with fluid. They put a thing around my nose and my mouth, and then they filled it up. And I remember walking away and leaving my body there. When they brought me back to bed, I came awake, and the back of my head and my hair was still wet with this sticky, kind of a thick gel type substance from having had it left there while I did whatever I did. Now, I don't know. I think that they've come up with it. I think that's an old way of doing it, actually, because I don't think they've done it. I mean, it hasn't been that complicated. I think it's a more a smoother transition into the ET body now. But for some reason, I remember that one stuck out, and I remember doing it that way. But I remember seeing lots of tubes with bodies. Yeah, lots of babies, children, different, absolutely. Okay. In the corridor, in the hallway, outside of the lab. Okay. On the ship. So.
Sherry, you were talking about you've met some of your hybrid children. How did you feel the first time meeting let's say the first one? Were you appalled? Did you feel love for it? A connection?
The conscious memory that I have of meeting my hybrid children, it was I asked to have that happen in 2011, I want to say 2010 or 2011. It was around the same time when I went through all my losses in 2009 and 2010. I lost my family through either death or estrangement. My two daughters both left me, and then my siblings either died or disowned me. And so at that time, it was just a time in my life when I lost everything, my business, and I lost my wealth, and I lost, a lot of people who wake up, they go through that kind of a clearing of their life. And that's what I went through. So I was very much feeling alone. I went from having this really great life to all of a sudden just everything around me was leveled and gone. So I was feeling kind of bad. I was in Arizona, and I was alone. And I remember saying how sad I was. I said, all of a sudden, I have no family. My family's just all of them are just gone. And I was feeling bad about it. And they came in, and I talked to them about it. And I said, they were trying to reassure me. And they said, well, you have us, and you have your children. And I said, well, yeah, but I don't get to see my children. My hybrid children I'd love to have some time with them. That would probably be very healing for me. So they picked me up, and they took me to this place. It's like a small Earth. It's a miniature Earth, a beautiful planet, but a very small planet. And they did a tribute, actually. They did I was not the only one there. There were, I don't know, 20, 30 other people there who had also volunteered for the hybrid program. And they did a fantastic little salute to us. They had us line up. I know that I remember being surprised because the person ahead of me was a man. And I remember thinking, a man? But there was a man there, and there's a woman behind me, and there was a long line of us, and they had us line up alongside this steep embankment. So there's a steep embankment over here, and then over there, it was more level ground. It was like a picnic area. It was really pretty. But there was a big white house, and there was a big red building that didn't look like a barn, but it was a big red building. And then there were rock outcroppings. It was just really pretty area. And they did this flyover with the ships, and they to salute us and to honor us for having served in the program, to have agreed to come on to the planet and to participate in the hybrid program. And all of a sudden these little saucer ships that we call it, the little ships that they use when they come to pick you up, they came from out of nowhere really fast. And there's a whole bunch of them came, and they came over, and they flew over the top of all of us who were standing in that line. And when they flew over the top of us, they came in, and then they tilted up on their side. And I've never seen them do that. And they flew over us on their side, really low and really fast. And it was really, it gives me goosebumps now even to think about it. It really touched me that they did that. And then they took us over to meet our hybrid children. I didn't get to meet all of mine. There were about 14 or so, a dozen or 14 of them there. And they were sitting over on this little embankment, like anyway, they were on this grassy embankment, and they were sitting there, and I was introduced to each of them one by one. And my involvement in the hybrid program was not to create human ET children. It was human to human, because my part of it was that what they wanted to do was preserve the human species. And so there was some ET maybe enhancements, but it was mostly human to human that they used to create these children. So that because at the time when they were doing that, we were doing this to it was not for certain that the planet was going to survive, and that or the planet was going to survive, but it was not for certain that humanity was going to make the shift. They weren't waking up at all, and so it looked like they were going to be washed off the planet, when the time came, as had been done so many times before. So that's why this was to make sure we could preserve the human physical species. So my children are mostly, but they're beautiful, really wonderful people, fantastic people. Wow, I was surprised. It's funny because, when this happened, I was in probably my mid to late 50s or something. I don't know why, but when they told me I was going to meet my children, I was expecting these little toddlers, little babies, little kids I could hold on my lap, and I get there and there's like a 24, 28-year-old, was the first one I met, So, I was shocked at how old they were, but they had from about 12 years old on up to about 28 years old. And I just met the ones that were living there on that planet. So it's cool.
Well, you're so blessed. Not having children myself, so if I knew I had some hybrid children out there, that'd be somewhat comforting to me. So, but not having any, so I've never lived through the pleasures of seeing them growing up. So yeah, you're lucky.
Yeah.
I've got one question. I don't want to take up too much for your time, because I know I would go on. Now, this is so amazing today. I'm really having a blast. I've got like 2 pages of questions again, but let's see. We'll finish with one that's really close to my heart. And it's because there's a lot of panic going on, and you were talking about the second Earth, a new Earth. So a lot of you you've talked about the what you've seen on the ships, and what type of Earth that might be. And there's a lot of talk about a second Earth or a new Earth. Now, would this be a type of the same Earth but changed, or is there actually a physical second Earth that's been created, and that those that would go on there would go there would die or ascend and be transferred to another planet? Could you go into that? Because I know, Suzy, you've talked about that in your book, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I've talked more about the warning signs that the Greys talk to us humans about, to look out for when we're coming towards a time of chaos on the planet. Those warning signs, for me, I've been seeing those since 2015. Probably prior to that, but more spaced out. But it's really become much more intense since 2015. And some of the exact things that they described, like large amounts of people roaming on the planet, with no physical or emotional or spiritual or geographical home to go to. So we've got, in the last few years, we've had hundreds and hundreds of thousands, millions of immigrants all around the world, South America, Europe, all over the place, moving in huge droves, trying to find somewhere to belong, somewhere to settle, somewhere to call home. For a whole variety of reasons, they've left their own countries. So that was one of the first things. And then, fighting in the streets and things being set on fire, and the increase in severe weather, which we're seeing, and the increase in earth changes, which we're also seeing. New Zealand's had about 3 or 4 of those things happen in the last few years, and it's happening around the world, but it seems to be speeding up. And now, of course, we've got this problem with a virus. So I think my messages from them have been more about what to look out for. But my understanding is that the new Earth we actually have to create, those of us who might be left at the end of all of this will have to create it. And even now with this virus situation in the world, we see people seeking new ways to do things, rediscovering the ways that we would like to be able to do things, but our busy lives prevent us from doing it. People are wanting to go back to that more peaceable, more easygoing, more caring kind of a life. So really it's about how far we've evolved spiritually over the next few years. It's all about spirituality, really, because the ETs are not going to come down here and have open contact with us when we are still in the kind of mindset that would take their technology, weaponize it, and use it against each other, rather than using it for the betterment of the planet. Until we turn that way of thinking around, we're going to be in for a rough ride, and I see this new Earth as being something that's a little far distant at the moment.
So, so I guess we're going to be screwed to an extent for the next couple of years.
Well, that depends on how much we stand up to those things. And of course, you've got three ladies sitting here talking to you who've stood up for what we believe and what we've experienced, and in some ways have suffered for it. So, you know, it's going to be a rough road ahead. And I think that experiencers, people who claim contact with ET somewhere down the line, when mankind starts examining the possibility of life again, because we've all forgotten about that at the moment, you know, because everyone's dealing with the virus, you know, so your mind is taken away. But when minds return to these other subjects eventually, and there's a time of examination takes place of all things, then there will be some fear factor, and particularly if the sightings start to be ramped up, which is what the ETs talked about. When you go through these things on the planet, we're going to start ramping up the sightings until it becomes undeniable, and you start talking about it openly and discussing it. That will be a time when people like us will be put under scrutiny and under the microscope. So one thing, Yanick, that I advocate in this field is integrity and ethics. And, you know, there's a lot of people out there making a lot of claims, and people could say the same about us three ladies, but, you know, we've stuck at this a long time, and we have worked very hard in the field. And I think that there's going to have to be some voices of reason in the future when this time of examination of the ET issue comes up, as it will, because it lies ahead in our future. We can't be an isolated planet and an isolated civilization forever. If we are to benefit from some of this wondrous technology that could help us improve our environment and our living conditions and our medical and educational side of life, then we have to learn to be more spiritual, to be able to raise our consciousness in order to be able to even operate some of the technology they have that is conditional on not only your frequency being reasonably high, but your spirituality being up there as well, because otherwise it would be like handing you know, a gun to a child. So there's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I'd like to. It's interesting, that last point Suzy just made about spirituality. Spirituality and vibrational frequency go together. This is what proper spirituality, as opposed to religion, is all about, is raising our vibrational frequency to a higher level through practices such as meditation, Tai Chi, prayer, whatever makes us feel good. And the other point is that the ETs are always pushing, as quantum physics is now proving, we create our own reality. So the more spiritually minded and positive minded we can be, the better reality we're going to create for ourselves. This is something that's so important. My teacher, Maris, has sent through about 3 messages over the past couple of weeks to do with all this, to do with the coronavirus, etc. And his main message is that about having to make the choice of linking into either love or fear, which is what the Armageddon thing is all about. It's not an outer war, it's an inner war within our own hearts. Understanding that and creating a positive reality future as opposed to a negative reality future by, again, learning to think in a positive way. And understanding that. My job down here with Suzy, it's about the technology, and I know that my job is about linking what they refer to down here as religion and spirituality with off-planet spirituality. It's really important for people to understand that there's a vast difference between the two, and that, you know, anything we can do to raise our vibrational frequency will help us to evolve. That's what human evolution is all about.
Okay, wow, thank you.
The other point is to remember is we're all multidimensional, including the Earth. The Earth's a living entity, and we're multidimensional. This is the real meaning behind mankind or humankind being made in the image of God. God's not an old man up on a cloud. God is a very high frequency, non-polarized energy. And we are created out of that energy. So, I mean, we all have God within us, God energy, universal life force energy within us.
Oh, that's so nice.
And I think that when we talk about the new Earth and that Earth being a sentient being is a multidimensional entity. So there are many versions of Earth. And so when we reincarnate next time, we'll be drawn back to whatever frequency Earth is going to suit our frequency.
Thank you. Wow, that's so nice. Sherry, thank you. Sherry, yeah, I think you did talk about the second Earth or something similar.
It's a miniature Earth. It's not the new Earth. It's a miniature Earth. It's where these beings are living for the time being.
Okay.
But my guys have taught me, and what they've shown me, they actually allowed me to visit what they called the new Earth.
Okay.
The new Earth is there because we are multidimensional beings, and everything is about frequency and about vibration. So it's not like there's just one Earth. We are all of us experiencing the Earth that we experience based on our frequency, and it changes according to where we are in our vibration at the time. If we slip into fear or if we're centered in love. So the new Earth is there already. We access it through our frequency. So the ascension, or this great Earth change, is what my guys call the great Earth change, is the shift into that new Earth is a matter of us raising our frequency, letting go of the fear. And this virus thing that's going on is everything that happens in our life and in this world is a result of our thoughts, our projections. We project out and we create the reality. We're like the projectors creating this movie, and we do it as a collective and as an individual. So this virus thing is part of the split. We've been in the split since, for a long time, but since 2012, really strongly, and then it's amping up. We had to buffer the photons coming in because humanity wasn't ready. I mean, they've been so slow in waking up, but we can't wait much longer. It has to happen. And so the virus is kind of forcing people to choose between love and fear. It's forcing them to have some time alone and some time to actually go within and to check in and to see who they are, what choices are they making. And that's what they have to do. I mean, we've been working, I know that's part of what my job is to, on a astral level, is to constantly be checking in with the souls, helping them to look at it and say, are you going to try to make this? Are you going to go for it? Are you going to try to move out of duality and into unity consciousness? Or are you going to stay here? You can still do it. You can do it at the last second. If anytime you can change your mind about how you want to perceive this life and this world, and you can move out of fear. So that's what the big thing is. The message from my guys has always been, the duality of fear and love. And they told me there will come a day, and that's the way they put it, there will come a day when those who are of a low frequency and those of the higher frequency can no longer coexist in the same time space. And we're at that point now.
Okay.
The dark, the Luciferian energy that's been on the planet and can control the planet for so long, and they've had their way long enough. It's done, and their reign is over. They can't continue anymore with those of us of the light that are here. They, you know, I mean, they try to destroy us, they try to fight us, but they don't stand a chance against us when we're unified like this, and we stand firm against them. And so they're being exposed right now, and there's going to be more and more exposure coming out, and it's going to be hard for people. But the reason that that's going to be happening is because here's the thing that a lot of New Age kind of people who are of a spiritual nature, they do want to just, you know, sit and send love and light to it. And that's wonderful, that's fine. But they actually have to look at this darkness. They have to look at what has gone on right under their noses while they were complacent and sitting and just being in their love and light. And I'm not slamming anybody, I'm just saying that's the beauty of the human spirit. They're so innocent, and they're just pure love. And so that's their nature, to just be love. But we also have to be protective of ourselves and of our innocent ones, our children, and that sort of thing. And so they're going to be forced to look at this and see what's gone on and how they've allowed the planet to be taken over because of that complacency. You know, it's a thing that I say that gets me in a lot of trouble because it's misinterpreted by a lot of people. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being the force of love and sending light and love to everything. And that's very healing, and that's very empowering, and that's a good thing. But what's happened on this planet has been a tragedy because people have not taken responsibility and they've refused to look at it because they're gentle souls. They don't want to look at that. It's painful. It's awful. You can't believe that there can be evil like that. No one wants to believe that, but it's there, and it will take over. Fear spreads, evil spreads if you don't stop it. And so that's where we're at with this virus thing. It's going to force people to make that choice, that final choice, because we've been nudging with them. We've been working with them since in the 2000s, you know, meeting with them on a soul level and saying, are you going to wake up? Are you going to wake up? Are you going to do this? You know, make a run for it. Are you going to move out of duality? Now's your chance. Because if you miss this chance, you're going to reincarnate. You're going to stay at that 3D level, and you're going to continue in that duality, which is fine. My guys said a million times, you know, there's no judgment in this. There's no judgment. It doesn't matter. And I mean, we all go up that ladder of life, and you go at your own pace. It's just that it's a sweet opportunity right now to move into a higher frequency, and who wouldn't want to be there, you know, instead. Yeah. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I just want to say something there, if I may, Yanick. Totally agree with what Sherry just said, and I've got myself into some hot water saying the same thing. And my guys have said to me, you have to start speaking out. They said this about 2 years ago. And I tend to be a watcher and a listener. I don't like to be speaking out too much, even though I'm a speaker. But there has to be some hard work done and some hard decisions made, and a lot of, as you said, there'll be a lot of exposures, and there might be a lot of people and groups crashing and burning, because there's this big sorting the wheat from the chaff kind of thing happening, and people being put in a position of having to choose whether they're going to move forward in an ethical way, or whether they're going to stay in a certain way because it suits them, because they benefit from it, or whatever, even though it may not be helpful to the rest of humanity. So yeah, I think that for people like us three ladies, there's a lot of hard work ahead of us, and some of it may be quite unpleasant, and we will have to be very strong.
Okay, well, yeah, we I guess in the upcoming years, people are gonna have to be more aware of what's going on, and more responsible for how they think and what they do. And we've been seeing a lot of that recently. A lot of like YouTube interviews and channels have been popping up, exposing all the the bad that's going on. So hopefully people are going to be more aware, and they're going to start acting up on it. And hopefully down the road things will turn out. So so ladies, I think we're going to call it a night. We've almost lasted 2 hours. So thank you very much for coming on. I can't state how much your contribution to the cause is so helpful. Please continue doing so. And if people want to purchase her books, where would they go to? Suzy, do you have a? Is it on Amazon or?
Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Okay. Well, you three could always send me the link, and I could add it directly to the info. So and do you guys have Facebook accounts, Twitter accounts that they can also?
Yep.
Oh,
Yep. Yep.
I'm not on any of that. No, I don't have time, and I can't do that. But I do have my my website, which is theforgottenpromise.net. You can get the book there, or contact me through that. I have a blog that's way behind. I don't post hardly ever, but they can get the book also at online on Kindle or on Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
Okay. Well, I could always add the links directly in the info. So, ladies, thank you so much. You've to me, you guys are the big three in my heart. You know, your contribution is so important, and thank you again so much for being on. And hopefully down the road we might do an interview one-on-one, and maybe perhaps go into details of because I know the questions tonight were somewhat general, but they were truly amazing, and you guys are awesome speakers. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone's enjoyed the talk. So thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you,
for
Yanick.
having
Thank
us.
you, Sherry and Judy.
Good night.
Yes.
Thanks. Good night. Night, ladies.
Bye.